Hello, everybody. I wanted to spend just a minute introducing Heather Dunaway Smith, who is an incredible sort of multi-disciplinary artist, illustrator, animator, designer, who creates these really powerful immersive art experiences. Heather has been a Adobe Creative Resident in 2020, or Adobe Artist in Residence, and has worked with Snap, with many groups, the Art Institute of Chicago, several, both sort of large corporations and clients, and several creative works, and with a variety of collaborators across the world. Her work is really unique and cutting edge, and I'm really looking forward to her sort of perspective and presentation on how one designs for these new media, and how one incorporates ideas from sort of various, not new but not so new media into this new tool and new set of tools and platforms. So thank you so much, Heather, for joining us, and I'm really excited both for your presentation today and your workshop next week. So take it away.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate being asked to do this and given the opportunity. Yeah, my name's Heather Dunaway Smith. I have a little video here which will give you a little introduction to some of my work and what I've done, but the gist of it is that I'm a storyteller that changes mediums depending on the type of story that I'm trying to tell. And I kind of started out in like songwriting and playwriting, and then eventually found computers and discovered there was this new kind of storytelling that could happen, and began to pursue that in earnest, and became an interactive designer. And I've been working in as a creative director for game companies, highlights for kids, stuff like that. Worked in children's media for a long time. And anyway, I've been exploring AR for the last 3 years. So I'm here to talk about that portion of it and how people can kind of bridge, basically start exploring this brand new medium and maybe bridge some of their old expertise into this, new landscape. So with that, I will start. One moment. Okay. Let's try this again. Still having a couple little technical issues. Let's try that again. Here we go.
I'm an XR artist. I blend storytelling, illustration, animation, interaction, audio, and the physical world into immersive art experiences. Storytelling was my first love. I started out as a songwriter, but soon turned my attention to interactive art. It combined all the things I like to do, and it allowed me to co-author with an audience. Historically speaking, most art has been one way. The artist creates and the audience observes, but I'm interested in blurring the line.
Oh, sorry about that. 1 second. Let's try that again, and I will fast forward. Oh, weird. Okay. Here. Well, let's just start here. Technical difficulty. If you want to see that video, I'll show you some of my work later, so we're not missing too much. But let's go ahead and talk about what you're going to learn today. Specifically, I wanted to basically create a class or a talk or a lecture or whatever you want to call this, a place where people can kind of learn where we are in AR and how to think about AR and how to start kind of exploring in that space. So with that, we'll cover the unique capabilities and constraints of AR, like what makes it special and unique. We'll go over my AR workflow and some best practices that I've learned along the way. Not only just like general AR best practices, but best practices for visual design, interaction design, and audio design. We'll also cover some specific design tips for those things. And we'll go over the current software, hardware landscape. Little caveat, this is not going to be an exhaustive exploration of that by any means. The industry is like definitely a moving target. It is changing every single day. And yeah, there's just no way that I could cover absolutely everything out there. But I will cover the stuff that I have the most experience with. And I'll tell you a little bit about each so that you can kind of decide if you want to start exploring where to begin. And then I'm going to give you some resources at the very end for basically ways to begin learning this and to begin exploring, because it's so new that there isn't tons and tons and tons of information online yet, you know, on YouTube or wherever. Like, there are tutorials and you can find them, but you know, there's less than there are for, like, say, web design, for example. So I'd like to give you guys a leg up and show you some good portals for finding help. So augmented reality, you probably know this, but it combines the real and the physical world with the digital world. It's a brand new tool. It's basically just a way to tell stories, whether they're data stories or more traditional narratives. And it's really the birth of a new medium, which is not something that happens every day. And just like every brand new medium, it really needs to discover what it's good at rather than just emulating pre-existing mediums. So, for example, when film came out, it actually emulated theater. All of the shots were like straight ahead, as though they were being filmed like on a stage with a proscenium, like with a frame. And then through exploration and making work, they discovered specific things that film could do that theater couldn't, like close-ups or jump cuts, the unique capabilities of that particular medium. And a language began to develop, and people began to figure out how to use film to tell stories. And so we're at a really similar crux with augmented reality. We really need to know, we don't really know how to use it yet. And so the only way we're really going to find out is if lots and lots of people are making lots of work and sharing that information with one another. So it's an exciting time. So let's go over some of the unique capabilities and constraints in AR. So one of the things that makes AR like very, very unique is its ability to leverage context. So this can be context of a specific location or, you know, like surrounding. For example, this is to celebrate the fall leaves. So I'm blending the real physical fall leaves with digital fall leaves. You can also leverage context in relation to the body or in relation to images. This is what's called an image target, which then has like an AR experience that's linked on top of it. So there's all these new ways that we can explore context, be it location, object-based, or body-based. And for that reason alone, AR is extremely exciting. Like, site-specific artwork has known for a really long time, like, how powerful context can be. And now we have this brand new tool that's especially good at it. So yes, it's very cool. So leveraging the body, there's a few different ways that you can do this. Like, now, first off, we're all born with bodies, like every single one of us. And because of that, our brains are actually built to understand the world around us in terms of our bodies, like how near or far objects are, how fast they are moving, you know, toward us or away from us. We have all of these innate senses built into our brain, which we can then leverage in augmented reality to make more effective experiences. So you're basically just like tapping into people's natural ability or natural knowledge within their body. So it makes things like scale and proximity two really, really powerful tools in AR. As I was saying, you can also leverage location. This was an Arbor Day piece that I created for Adobe, which was essentially a picture frame that was designed for people's favorite trees. And they could then share their favorite trees, you know, as a way of commemorating, you know, what they appreciate with one another online. But you could also use it for, say, a walking tour in a brand new city, for example, if you wanted people to learn the history of a particular place. Or you could attach an AR experience to a historical building, you know, like the Colosseum, for example. And then people could actually, in situ, learn more about this location, about its history, and put the history to the location, making a stronger connection and really bringing history to life. It's very powerful stuff. So those are some of the unique things that AR can do, which we'll dig in more, but this is a bird's eye view of my typical workflow. I'll go into each one of these like a little bit deeper, but the gist is you got to start with goals. So you define what you're trying to do. Then you move on to ideating, like through sketching and just sort of, brainstorming. Then you actually form those ideas into a storyboard, which is a plan of how, how your project is going to proceed. Then you take that plan and you make it into a prototype, which is like a very skeletal, basic version of the experience that you can then test in physical space, which is really important because as you begin to explore spatial mediums, you'll discover that, or at least I have, that it's not as intuitive as you would think. So actually trying it in space with your body is vital. Once you've sort of proven your plan through prototypes, you move on to actually designing and creating the assets. So the 3D models, the illustrations, the animations, the audio, whatever it is that's going to be part of your experience, you make that stuff. Then you have to lay it out in an AR spatial scene using AR software of some sort. Then once the layout is done, you can actually add all of the interactions, like tapping things or proximity triggers, create animations when people get close to an object or further away from an object, stuff like that. You add the spice, if you want to call it that. Once all of the ingredients are part of the scene, then you really have to test it and test it well, both yourself and with others. A new set of eyes is always insightful and very, very helpful. So I recommend it. And then once it's all done, it's time to share it with other people. So I'll dig into each one of these a little bit more. All right, so setting goals. I typically break down my goal setting into a few different columns. There's what I would like the piece to accomplish, maybe user goals, and possibly even client goals if it's a client-based experience that I'm creating. And then once you get those on paper, you can be like, okay, now I know exactly the target I'm aiming for, and you can begin letting your brain figure out how to get there. So now that you have your goals, it's time to ideate. I am a drawer, I'm an illustrator, so this is really one of my favorite parts of the process. I can really just let my brain go wild through my hand and discover this world that I'm trying to build. It often starts with an inspiration illustration. So I'll create an illustration, and then that will lead, all of the rest of the project will kind of be based off of that initially. And you can tell based on this final piece that the idea really can morph, as you're creating an experience. You'll also often make discoveries that make you want to adjust things here and there, of course, because it's all about, discovering what's working and what's not, and then adjusting as needed. So, but it's always really good for me personally as an illustrator to have this sort of core piece of artwork that captures the mood and maybe some of the main characters of a piece. Once I have that, I have my basic idea. It's time to actually make it into a storyboard. Storyboards define key moments, the story arc, interactions, animations. It's typically done in kind of like a comic book panel style. And what I'll do is I'll actually map out how a participant will get from point A to point B. And then I'll also sort of designate any sort of key interactions. Like, for example, this piece was an interactive musical experience. And I had these little creatures that would basically come to life when you got close to them. And there would be little animations and sounds and all sorts of stuff to sort of get your attention and, entice you to interact with them. So that's what I've designated here in this particular panel. So this is your roadmap for absolutely everything in the project. And I would really recommend it for almost all projects. If there's any sort of complexity, it's just really, really helpful. Okay, once you have your plan, it's time to move on to prototyping. I typically use really, really basic shapes just so that I can spend zero time making the assets. I just want to lay things out and try them. Adobe Aero comes with a bunch of pre-built shapes which you can use. This is a whack-a-mole prototype that I created, and here's like a ring toss prototype. Essentially, I wanted to see what these these physical experiences, how they would translate to AR, how they would feel different, how they would work, maybe opportunities for how I could do things differently, given that we're working in AR, pretty much anything is possible. So it invites the opportunity to really turn things on their head. Concepts or games, game mechanics, for example, we can reconsider them in a space where the laws of physics are different, for example. I created a roller coaster prototype at one point that actually the roller coaster moved around you while you stood stationary, rather than, of course, being on a roller coaster and moving with it. And, that's kind of an example of like turning a long-standing idea on its head and just seeing what happens. So as I described before, let's go back one. Once you have your prototype and you've tested it in physical space and you're happy with it, now it's time to actually move on to designing, which of course I love this part. I get to create all of my 3D assets, all of my 2D animations. I'm a big After Effects user, so I'll often create illustrations that I then move on to 2D animations in After Effects. There are a whole variety of programs that you can use to create assets for AR experiences. So if you're a digital creative, I'm positive that the applications that you already know and love can be used to create these assets. Each piece of software has its own specific file requirements, which you can look up and then export properly. But your pre-existing skill set is totally usable. My favorites are Procreate on my iPad, because as I said, I'm an illustrator. And then Photoshop and Illustrator on a desktop computer are also really invaluable. I use After Effects for 2D animations, and I use Blender for 3D, both modeling, texturing, and animations. And I've been beginning to use the Substance Suite as well, which Adobe just purchased. So. All right, once you have your assets, it's time to actually lay them out in a spatial scene. So you typically do this just by dragging and dropping. This is Adobe Aero, for example. You drag and drop, and then you can scale them and position them using this variety of tools on the left-hand side. So you've got the Move tool. You can move things up, down, forward, back. You'll notice each axis is a different color. There's also the Rotate tool. Does the exact same thing, but does it with rotation. Scale makes things larger or smaller. And then you can adjust all of these things as well in the Properties panel in the lower right-hand corner. Then the ways that you navigate the 3D space, there's a tool called Orbit, which allows you to orbit around the 3D space. Then there's Pan, which allows you to move up, down, left, or right. And then Dolly, which is essentially like a zoom. It allows you to go forward and back within a space. So once you do your layout and you're happy with it, then you test it in physical space just to make sure that it is translating in the way that you want it to. As I said earlier, it's hard to know what these things are really going to feel like. And so you really have to try them in physical space with your own body to fully understand. So once your layout is done, it is time to move on to all the cherries on top. So all the animations, the interactions, you're really bringing the world to life at this point. In Adobe Aero, this is done through the Behavior Builder, which is in the lower left-hand corner. And essentially what you do is you select a trigger, be it a start trigger, which is essentially a timer, a tab trigger, which is just like a button on a web page. When you tap it on your phone or tablet, it will initiate an experience, or a proximity trigger, which is based on proximity, so distance between the participant and whatever object you attach it to. So, for example, I attached an animation action to a proximity trigger on the hands, so that when people get close to the hands in the middle of the experience, then they will come to life and play an animation. So that's the basic gist. You've got something that triggers it. So this can be, like I said, a timer, a tap, or a proximity trigger. And then you have an action. So something that happens when the trigger is launched. So this can play an animation. This could rotate something. This could make something appear or make something disappear. There's a lot of options, but this is the basic framework for setting those up in Aero. So once your experience is buttoned up and you're pretty happy with it, it's time to put it through the ringer. So this means testing it really, really thoroughly. I try to test. My very patient friends and family have done lots of user testing for me. And basically what I do is I hand off the experience to them with little to no information. And then I just stand back and I watch them interact with it. And I'm looking for moments of confusion, moments of delight. And then after they're done with the experience, I'll interview them and try to drill down a little bit into, what was working, what wasn't working, what they thought the story was, if they were emotionally moved, all the stuff that you want to know about your project, so that I can then go back and iterate. And if things aren't working, I want to know, so that I can make it better. The other thing that you really need to test, depending on the type of project you're creating, like who it's for, like the audience, I try to test on different devices if I can. So, people have a wide range of mobile devices. Some people have, much older phones. Some people have brand new phones. And I try to create stuff that's, as widely accessible as possible. So I'll try to view the experience through a few different mobile devices and see if there's any bugs essentially that are appearing. So once your testing is done and you've iterated and you're totally happy with the project, it's time to share it with people. There's a variety of ways of doing this, and it really depends on the software that you're using. I'll go over Aero for now, but there's a share button in the upper right-hand corner. And if you hit export, you can actually save a file to your computer, which you can then share with people, or you can automatically generate a URL and a QR code, which you can see here in the upper right-hand corner. And basically what happens is you'll send that URL or QR code to somebody that you want to view the piece. They will launch it. And if they have Aero, it will automatically, if they have Aero installed on their phone or tablet, it will automatically launch the experience. And if they don't have it, it will prompt them to install it. So this particular software package does require that you have the app installed on your mobile device before viewing. Some of them are built to work with social media networks, which we'll dig into a little bit later, and others are actually built for the browser, so people don't have to download anything, which I think everything's moving towards that direction, but we're not quite there right now. Anyway, that is the workflow that I typically go through. All right, so now let's talk about some of the stuff that I've discovered over the last 3 years. These are just guidelines to think about when you're creating. They are not hard and fast rules, so just take it as a lens to view the world and ask questions. Not like religious text or something. Okay, so number 1, design for safety. Because you're creating an experience that blends the physical world with the digital world, and people could be moving around a space within it, it's really important to design for safety. So you never want to block people's entire world. You want them to be able to see the physical world. And also, you never want to make somebody walk backwards. I know this might seem kind of silly, but I have seen some experiences that hadn't taken this into account. And walking backwards is a great way to get people to stumble, as you can probably imagine. So just try to design for the full human experience when you're creating these things. Since people will be experiencing them with their body in physical space, it's really important to take the physical space into account and the body within it. Number 2, Onboarding is really important. You have to keep in mind that, depending on your audience, a large number of people have never ever tried augmented reality before. And it can be a little disorienting and confusing. So I recommend, unless you know that you're designing for some experts or something, try to design with beginners in mind. Not only will it make everything clearer for everyone, but also it will just make it more accessible so people, more people can experience your piece. Onboarding, if you're unfamiliar with that term, basically just means the very first impression, the very first steps that you lead a user through when you're opening an experience. So things like establishing a strong focal point and giving them instructions in the very beginning. That's an example of solid onboarding, which we'll go into a little bit more later. Number 3, communicate space requirements early. So if you have an experience that's going to require like a bigger footprint, you should really try to communicate that at the very beginning of the experience, because I've seen this happen 1,000 times, which is why I'm mentioning this, but people can place an experience within their room, but they'll place it too close to a wall, for example, and then suddenly people can't get to half of your experience because it's like physically within the wall. So if you communicate that expectation early, then you're basically setting people up for success. So they can find, a place that is large enough to accommodate the experience, and then they can experience it. So people don't have to start over again. That can cause a real hiccup in storytelling. If you're trying to create like a fluid experience, having to close it down, go to a new space, relaunch it, try it again, all of that breaks, it breaks some of the realism, or at least the immersion. So communicating early is great. Number 4, using contextual instructions. So because there's a lot going on sometimes in these AR experiences, it's important to basically give people information when they need it and not all at once. This means that people are going to actually retain the information better. They'll have a better idea of why they need that information and how to use it. So one excellent way of doing this in AR is by using those proximity triggers that I was talking about earlier. Basically, so for example, I attached a proximity trigger to this flower. So when somebody gets close to it, then they're suddenly given the instruction, oh, tap on this for more. They can then tap on it and they'll experience, whatever the action is that you have associated with that proximity trigger. It's a way of, contextualizing instructions. So your experience is easier to understand. Number 5, keep your overall file size small. Most of these devices are going to be running either on a mobile phone or on a pair of glasses, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But all of these devices have limited processing power. And when you're using 3D assets especially, but really all assets can be taxing, these experiences can get like pretty heavy duty for processors pretty quickly, because not only is it having to keep track of all of the elements like in their spatial relationship and interactions and animations, but it's also having to track that to the physical world, tracking the planes within your environment, that sort of stuff. So so I just recommend, depending on your software, some of them actually have built-in file size constraints. The ones for social networks are pretty low, which we'll go over later. But for Aero, for example, I try to keep all of my experiences below 50 megabytes. This also means that if people are trying to view your experience like out in the world when they're not connected to Wi-Fi, they won't have to download as much. Again, it'll just make the experience run smoother and just be more fluid for your users. So try to keep it tight. That's what I say. All right. Number 6, keep it short and sweet. Okay. At this point, I would say that people get pretty easily fatigued when using AR experiences. There's kind of a lot of information that you're processing, on top of the physical world, all this digital stuff. And I just think the most successful experiences I've seen have been simple. So at least at this point, when people are viewing most of these things through a mobile device, I would recommend keeping your experiences short and sweet. You can be really impactful with very, very little. This is also just like this is a helpful constraint as a creative. It pushes me further to create more concise experiences that have real clarity of purpose and intention. So anyway, I would recommend keeping it short and sweet, at least for now, as we're kind of discovering this new medium. And I would say don't try to recreate VR in AR. So VR completely immerses someone within a digital experience, removing the physical world. And AR augments the physical world. So if you create an AR experience that overwrites everything within the physical environment, without any sort of, core connection to it, then why use AR? What AR does is leverages the physical world with this additional digital capabilities. So just general rule of thumb, try to make sure that you're using the right medium. If you have an experience that requires that kind of like complete immersion, maybe VR is the right way to go. But I suggest that when you're creating AR, try to ask yourself why AR? Why is this particular medium the best tool for this particular story? And am I leveraging its unique capabilities well, essentially? Okay, so let's talk about some visual design best practices. So again, these are just some things that I've learned along the way, trying to create compositions and stuff. And here's some little helpful tips for you as you begin to think about visual design within these AR experiences. And actually, I'm going to stop for coffee refill. 1 sec. This is a lot of talking. Okay, refilled. Thank you. Let's go. Okay, number 1, design for mobile screen real estate. So most of these experiences at this point are designed for mobile phones or tablets, which, as you can tell, have a very limited screen real estate. And so you have to think about your compositions and your spatial layouts in terms of that framing. And again, sometimes this means less is more because those screens are not very big. And if you create an experience that is like enormous, they will really only be able to view the full experience from far away. That might be what you're trying to design, which is totally cool, totally fine. But just always take into account the frame with which these experiences are going to be viewed. So if you're making something for mobile devices, screen real estate should be top of mind. I think about framing from the very beginning, especially the initial framing. So this is the very first thing that your participant will see in an experience. I typically put it a few feet out in front of a participant so that when they launch it, it's at a comfortable distance from them where they can see the whole thing. Because they'll be able to see it, they'll know where to go, they'll sort of intuitively understand, oh, okay, this is the first step in the experience, and I can interact with it. So again, when you're creating these projects, like really think about framing, especially the initial frame. Place objects at a comfortable height. So if you're creating world experiences, you will need to think about the average height of your user. Like, are you creating this for children? Are you creating this for a basketball team? Is this a tabletop experience, or is it more world-based, like you walk through it? All of these things need to be taken into account when you're thinking about placing things vertically. There's also different pieces of software which allow you to detect the height of the mobile device and will kind of put things at level with the mobile device, and that can be really handy, but not all software has that. So If you are not using some of that, more advanced software, think about the vertical height. You want people to be able to actually use this stuff. Create readable type using a few of these techniques. So legibility, as any designer will tell you, is huge. And in AR, there are some unique challenges. You really don't have control over contrast, like with the background, in the same way that you do in flat design. So there's a few different ways you can navigate this, like using outline, glows, backdrops. All of these things can kind of offer you an opportunity to offset the text from the physical world, making it more readable. You can also, if you don't want to overwrite, if you don't want to block out the physical world with like just an opaque graphic, you can also use transparent objects. That can be really helpful. Or if you're using some more advanced, a more advanced piece of software, one of my favorite things to do is actually create a little bit of an object behind the text that is slightly transparent with a little bit of blur. It allows you to see the physical world, so it's not taking you out of your actual environment, but it also creates a really readable, very clean looking experience. And it adapts well to all sorts of environments, which is really one of the biggest things about designing for AR. You really have to design for adaptability, like almost constantly, because you don't know what kind of environment people are going to be viewing these experiences in.
Immersive experiences, things can get complex quickly. You could have multiple animations, a voiceover, a soundtrack, and lots of visual elements, all competing for the user's attention. So designers must really learn to cut through the noise to create a clear experience by editing, timing things independently, and relaying only what is needed.
Only what is needed when it's needed. Sorry, I didn't realize I left the audio on that particular clip. But yeah, what she said. Again, I think simplicity is really key. And honestly, it's one of my biggest challenges as a designer, because I kind of want to put everything in there. I just get excited. But editing is queen in this medium, in my experience. Unless you're going for something like Maximal, which is totally cool too, but for like clear, easy to understand designs, simplicity is really best. Simplicity of editing down to only the needed elements, timing things independently so people actually have time to like visually look at things as they appear or disappear. Basically creating a more spacious experience for people by using timing. It's a better way of kind of leading people from one thing to the next. And then revealing elements based on context. This is that contextual instructions that I was talking about earlier. Basically like limiting the information that you're feeding people and only giving it to them when it makes sense to. It's really that simple.
In AR, there are also specific capabilities that you should take advantage of. Since we're designing for a human with a body, one needs to think in terms of the human body. Our brains are built to navigate a 3D world, so we inherently understand how large or small, near or far an object is from our bodies. This makes scale and proximity two really powerful tools
in AR. Again, this is the first time I'm giving this presentation, so didn't realize I left the audio on these clips, but I'm just going to roll with it. As I've been saying, when you're designing for AR, you're designing for a human being with a body and a brain that knows the world in terms of its body. So using things like scale and proximity can be really, really powerful. Like in that last clip that I showed you, just creating, a very, very simple 3D model of a human being, but making it enormous and putting it right next to your body feels impactful. Like you understand how big that thing is. And so that can just bring emotion and meaning to experiences in interesting ways. Similarly, if you went really, really, really tiny compared to a body, that brings up a whole other list of interesting kind of reactions or possibilities. If you put something far away from someone or you put it right next to them, these are, powerful tools at your disposal when you're working in a spatial medium like AR. So now let's talk about interaction design. So creating clear interactions in AR can be a little challenging sometimes because there's so much going on, and as I've described before, you don't really have control over where people are experiencing these things. It can be a loud environment, it can be a visually busy environment. There's a lot of variables that can happen. So I really try to create clarity from the very, very beginning. And there's a few different ways that you can do this and to think about creating interactions in AR. So creating clear visual hierarchies is, it's important for design, but for visual design, but it's really, really important for interaction design. But you can use things like scale, color, pattern, like all of the visual design principles that you may be familiar with, but you can also just look up if you want. There's all of these tools at our disposal that allow us to, there's a lot of thinking about visual design principles and interaction design principles that we can leverage within AR. But creating clear visual hierarchies with all of those devices can be really, really powerful. So, for example, if I created an experience that is entirely black and white, and then I put a red flower in the middle of it, people will be drawn to that red flower and then will possibly interact with it. So that's one example of how you can use clear visual hierarchies to kind of direct attention within a spatial experience. So responding to users' input is really vital. So when people do things, you want to let them know that you hear them, or that your buttons are designed in this way. So on hover and click, there will often be like two different colors, or at least some sort of button reaction. It lets you know that oh, okay, if I do this thing, it's going to respond in this way. So I do this by either creating a tap trigger. For example, here I'll go ahead and assign a spin action. So when people tap this little flower, it will both spin and play audio at the same time. And I'm basically communicating to the participant, number one, this world is alive. Anything could happen. So tap and explore. It encourages people to explore and discover new things. But also it it's creating trust between the participant and your art experience that you've created. You're communicating to them, hey, I see you, I hear you, there's stuff to discover here. Hit areas, if you're creating tap triggers, should be pretty easy. So again, this is another example of when simplicity is kind of best. Because people are having to tap things on their phone screen, for example, the human finger can only be so small. And if there's a ton of stuff happening within that screen, it can be really, really hard for them to target the particular thing that you're trying to click. And it can also be hard for the software to understand exactly what they're trying to target if there's overlapping 3D elements within the space. So making sure that stuff that is tappable has plenty of breathing room around it, or hit area is another way of saying that, is really important. So if you want people to tap it, make it easy. Leverage pre-existing knowledge. I was talking about this a little bit earlier, but in UX design, people talk about leveraging pre-existing knowledge all of the time. So, for example, I created a piece that was based on whack-a-mole because people already know whack-a-mole, or many people do anyway. They would intuitively know how to use that interface because they're already familiar with whack-a-mole. But there are thousands of examples of this. If you're creating an experience, that it can leverage maybe the way that calculators are designed. you're basically like giving people a leg up on your interface by creating something that is more inherently intuitive, at least for the folks that have experience with that analog parallel. But it can be really, really helpful for creating really clear experiences. And as this slide says, when we do this successfully, we reduce cognitive load, so people don't have to process things with, as many neurons as they would otherwise. So it's easier. Number two, it can create instinctual interactions, so people are just reacting to things and not having to think about how to react to things. And it can improve usability because of these reasons. Like it just makes stuff that's easier to understand. If you we're smart, we have, we've all had lives where we've experienced things. So why not take that pre-existing information and apply it to what you're building to make more intuitive experiences? This is an example of using a path. So we all know what a path or a sidewalk is, and when you put it on a ground, people intuitively understand, oh, I should follow this path. It's probably going to lead me somewhere. So when creating spatial experiences, things like paths can be really helpful because they, fluidly communicate to your user, hey, if you follow this, you're going to experience things along the way, and it will lead you somewhere. And you can do that without having to put, a graphic that says follow the path. You can do both. Actually, some redundancy is often wise, depending on what you're creating and who it's for. But this is a very seamless way of basically including those instructions invisibly within your experience. So essential interactions need to be discoverable. So if you're creating an experience that has a few key focal points that do something that lead to something else, and that is what actually creates the story arc, you need to make sure that those essential interactions are very, very discoverable. And so what I like to do is I'll actually create some redundancy with how people can discover the interaction. Just in case they don't trigger one, it will trigger another. So I will attach a proximity trigger with an animation, which you saw here in this clip. As you walk toward that central flower, it begins to animate, and you get a contextual instruction that says tap. But there's also audio that's associated with that, which you can't hear on this particular video, but that's a secondary way of communicating, oh, I've triggered something. I need to look around for whatever it is that is creating that sound. And if you connect a piece of audio with an animation and a proximity trigger, that's the special sauce, because you're triggering it based on their proximity. So when somebody gets close to something and it begins to move, it makes a sound. People know that it was their body that created that, and they'll be encouraged to kind of explore further. So, and another way of adding some additional redundancy is to also add a proximity trigger and a tap trigger to the same object. So if somebody doesn't actually get physically close enough to it, but they tap it, it will still launch the experience, and they'll be able to, have the full story arc that you're trying to create for them. So basically building redundancy, giving people multiple opportunities to discover the essential pieces of information is really important, especially if you're creating sort of more complex storytelling. Designing for your participant's body. AR gives us this really unique opportunity. So here's some examples of proximity art experiences that I created. This was created at the beginning of the pandemic, where I was just sort of noticing that when I was talking with other people that had really strong emotions, they would kind of attach to me too. And so I created an experience using an orbit animation where people, when they got close to the letters of feelings, the letters move up and then began to stick to the person, like around their physical body. So that's one example of using the participant's body. And eventually all of those feelings like cluster up, and you really can't, like it feels claustrophobic, which was kind of the point of the piece. But also I created that butterfly cyclone, which you saw there a second ago. This was really just an example of me trying to make my own dreams come true, but it is a good example of how you can leverage the participant's body in a unique way that is both interactive and like integrates the participant in a more meaningful way. So with the butterfly cyclone, as you move towards the butterflies, they move off the ground and they begin to fly around you indefinitely, creating a cyclone of butterflies, which was something I always wanted, and something I wanted to give to other people as well. So yeah, so that's another example of being able to leverage people's own bodies within experiences. Creating interactive depth. All right, so by interactive depth, I mean create a variety of interaction types, like both proximity triggers, tap triggers, maybe things that are triggered by audio. It's a blend of interactions, some of which are totally essential and some of which are optional. So for example, this is the essential interaction, which is in the middle of the experience. And then the periphery is sort of sprinkled with these optional interactions. And the idea here is that you're creating a full world. So for example, if a person walks around and they see the big central red flower and they interact with it and they're like, okay, cool, that was very clear. Like I needed to interact with that flower, but maybe I'll go tap on this little thing. What does this do? Or maybe they just get close to something and suddenly it comes to life. Those interactions are optional. They didn't have to discover that interaction in order to experience the full story arc of the piece. But because they did that, the world feels more alive and they feel more inspired to kind of explore and see what else will respond to them within the space. So it's a way of creating authenticity and a sense of immersion within these AR experiences. So blending the essential with the optional and blending different types of interactions, be them proximity triggers, tap triggers, audio triggers, etc. So now let's talk a little bit about AR audio. Audio is often overlooked, but I think that it's actually essential to create presence within immersive environments. Like audio gives us all sorts of information that we kind of take for granted about our physical space. It lets us know where we are, how near or far things are. And also it's a shortcut to the heart. Like we all know this. We've listened to music that without any words whatsoever, we know inherently the emotion that it's trying to communicate to us. Or, non-musical sounds like crowds cheering. Like we know emotionally what that sound is. So this is a way of both creating a presence within an experience and an immersive experience, but also injecting it with emotion and also just communicating with your audience, which we'll dip into a little later here. Yeah, audio can give the audience context. It's like is the experience happening in a basketball court or is it happening in space? Like even with zero visuals, we can communicate something about the context of the experience. And when audio is partnered with visuals, that's like, now we're cooking. Like people are really going to be more invested into the environment that you're creating because you're creating a more complete environment. Like we are human bodies with ears. We use them all the time. We just don't think about it all the time. So spatial audio can really ground people within the experience. As I was saying before, you can tell when when a sound is near or far from you. So if you're trying to get someone's attention, for example, of something that's like across the room, audio, especially when combined with animation, is a great way of doing this. It it makes the experience feel more real. They exist within that space because they can tell with their ears that they are near or far from something. So it can be used to guide and direct attention. So again, I use that with this experience where when you get close to the central flower, it initiates a sound, which like calls you to the central flower. And this is just a great way of sort of guiding the user through your experience, like offering them little auditory clues of where they need to explore further. Yeah, I'll just let this play. So this is just an example of the kind of clear, like, emotional content of audio and how we can use it. Music is a great way of injecting mood and emotion into your pieces. So sometimes that's like the difference between like an okay experience and something that's like mind-blowing. So I would encourage you to really try to tap into people's emotions by using quality music or audio. And audio can provide feedback for people. So I've been describing this kind of all along, but to reiterate, like, I often will couple an animation and an audio trigger or an audio action to a trigger. So for this tap trigger, I've attached both an animation that makes it spin and a little piece of audio, which unfortunately you can't hear on this video, but it communicates feedback. It lets people know that they tapped on something because it's instantaneous. It's an instantaneous response. So yeah, and audio, when combined with its visual elements, really helps reinforce information. This was a musical experience that was an amusement park, but in AR and in miniature. And each one of these pieces have audio that help better communicate sort of what they are, what they're doing, and their general, I guess, kind of attitude, since they're all like little creatures. So that's one way that you can kind of use audio to sort of reinforce information within an experience. So that's the best practices section of this talk. And now we can kind of talk about the nitty-gritty of how these things are made and what the current software landscape and hardware landscape is, at least like the stuff that I have the most experience with. So right now there's kind of two categories of software out there. There's the stuff that's based on social media networks, and there's the stuff that's like app or web-based. So for the social media, examples of this are Lin Studio, which is created by Snap. So their experiences are viewable through Snapchat, and or through their, they do have a pair of AR glasses called the Spectacles, which we'll go into a little bit later. But yeah, everything created with Lin Studio is going to be viewed through Snapchat or through the Spectacles. Another example is Spark AR, which is created by Meta, aka Facebook, whatever you want to call them, aka Instagram. They're all the same company. But when you create experiences within Spark AR, they're only going to be viewable within that Meta ecosystem. So it could be Instagram, Facebook, or now they have like some support on Oculus with AR pass-through, which we'll talk about in a second too. And then last, there's Effect House by TikTok. This is the newest member of the AR social media software landscape. And it's early days. I think it's only been out for, I think I've been part of the beta for like maybe a year, but I think it was released to the public like a few months ago. So, very, very new. But again, anything that's created on Effect House is only viewable through TikTok. Now, the nice thing about the social media-based ones is that a lot of people already have these apps on their phone. So if you want people to experience something, then there's not like an additional hurdle of having to ask people to download yet another thing, which, we all know there's like so many apps. There's like apps for everything. And at some point we get like app burnout. And also sometimes you're just like not in a place that has strong Wi-Fi, so you can't download a full app because often they're, many megabytes. So, so that's one consideration. So if you're trying to design, also discoverability is a big thing about designing with these social media based applications. Like each one of them has different ways that people can kind of discover your content or discover the artworks that you've been making sort of organically. And so you can have some nice organic reach to other people. The other section are the app or the web-based products. So one that I'm very familiar with is Arrow, which is created by Adobe. It's in order to view things through it, people are going to have to download Arrow. So that's what I mean by like app-based. But because of that, it doesn't belong on a single social media network, and you can send it to anybody, whether or not they're on TikTok or not. You know what I mean? For the more, now let's talk about sort of the more like professional level. I don't really think that's the right word, frankly, but like more enterprise level, maybe more complicated, really. Unity is game development software, and you can use things like ARKit or ARCore or Vuforia to create AR experiences within Unity. But to use Unity, you really need to know how to code. And sometimes when you're building things, having a team would be helpful because you're really building it from scratch versus these other software packages, which really offer you more like drag and drop functionality. So if you're making something like an enterprise, like commercially available app with AR in it, then Unity might be the way to go for you. Another option within Unity is Lightship, which was just released by Niantic. It's their ARDK. It's basically just like a chunk of AR functionality that can be inserted into sort of any Unity project. So again, in order to use it, you'll need to know Unity and C# probably, and have maybe some game dev background or a willingness to learn, because there's actually lots of I'll go over this later, but there's lots of places you can learn this stuff. Another option, so with both of those Unity solutions, people are going to have like an app to view them through. So that's often how they're distributed. So you have to submit to like the iOS store or the App Store, and then your app will show up and people can download it and experience the AR that you've created. Another option, which I'm hoping things move towards, is a web XR option. There's a company called 8th Wall, which was just purchased by Niantic. That is, it's browser-based AR experiences. By the way, if you're not familiar with Niantic, you probably are and just don't realize it. They're the folks that created Pokemon Go. So this is often people's first introduction to the concept of augmented reality. And it's still really, really popular. And they're doing really cool, interesting stuff in this space. So anyway, they just purchased this new product called 8th Wall, which does web-based AR. So when people view it, they don't have to download anything special. It's just kind of like part of their native experience, and it creates a more seamless, project. Another option is Reality Composer, which is by Apple. And it's really powerful stuff, and it's only viewable on iOS devices. So that's something to consider if you want to, make things available for both iOS and Android. Maybe another solution would be better. So Arrow is often what I recommend for beginners because it's free, it's drag and drop, there's no coding whatsoever, and it kind of follows a similar structure to like a lot of Adobe products, like in the way that it uses like layers and different tools and stuff. So I think it can be kind of, a lot of people have experience with like Photoshop and stuff, and so people can leverage that pre-existing knowledge in this interface and kind of just like get going like immediately. It does only create world-based, surface-based experiences, so like something that you would place in your world, or image-based experiences. So these are the image anchors that I was talking about earlier, like when I was showing you like the piece of jewelry I created. There's like an image on the watch face that the AR experience is connected to via an image anchor. And so either world-based or image-based. It's not tied to social, but it does require an app. There's pretty good documentation. Actually, I just completed like a really big tutorial series for them that's available. I'll give you a link to it later, which will talk more in depth about the stuff that I'm talking about today, and also like introduce you to the Arrow environment. Lin Studio is one of my favorites, honestly. Like they are, they're really at the forefront, in my opinion, of a lot of this technology. Like you can do world-based, image-based, face-based. You can also do body-based, both 3D, like 3D meshes that covered a person's entire body, or 2D, which is more of like a flat experience, like around a body. You can also track hands and associate hand experiences, or objects and stuff with hands. Like for example, I've created like like fire that emerges from people's hands. Other people are creating like fireballs that you can like throw across the room. It's pretty awesome. It actually tracks all of your the joints within your hand, and can tell how near or far the joints are, and so it can tell what your hand is doing in 3D space. They also have the ability to do object-based experiences. So they have custom landmarking is what it's called, but basically you can scan a landmark, like a big statue, for example, like in your downtown, and then associate experiences with it, and it will create like a real-time mesh on top of it. They also have some AI, like machine learning, that's available in some of their templates, that does like object recognition that you can then associate experiences with. So for example, if you scanned an apple, or it detected an apple, like when you were scanning your environment, then it could bring up a series of stories about apples, that are like attached to that object within space. So those are everything that Lin Studio can do, that and more. Honestly, they're always coming out with stuff. It's kind of hard to keep up, but you can either use this as no code, because it comes with a bunch of templates, or a tool called visual scripting, which is a way of creating the same functionality that you would with code, but you do it using a visual interface. So it can be really good for visual learners. I like it, although I don't use it that much, because I did learn to code, back in college, and I'm still kind of going that route. But I like that it's there, and I like it when I see a project that's made with it, because I can quickly understand exactly how things connect and stuff. So there's that capability, but you can also, go hardcore game dev, do a bunch of custom code, make things that's like super powerful. This tool is really good, I think, for all levels, like both people that are starting out and folks that have game dev experience, or whatever, like more intense experience. There's really good documentation, and it's free. But as I was saying before, this is only when you create experiences with this. It's only available for viewing on Snapchat or through the spectacles. So that's something to keep in mind. Spark AR is another option, and this is created by Meta. They they have a pretty big user base. Like I think there's, a couple 100,000 people like within the Facebook group for Spark AR. So there's lots of people making for Spark AR. It does world-based, image-based, face-based, and it does 2D body and 2D hands. So this software at this point doesn't understand hands in 3D space, but it can understand the shape of a hand and then apply 2D stuff sort of around it. I imagine 3D is coming, but we're not there yet. This can also be used with either no code or custom code. It comes with templates just like Lin Studio. So you'll choose a template and then to start with, and then you'll customize it, make it your own. And they do offer like a node-based scripting editor. So again, you can do the visual scripting if that's good for you. When you create experiences with Spark AR, they're only viewable on Instagram, Facebook, or now passed through Oculus. It comes with pretty good documentation, pretty good templates, some innovative capabilities, although not quite as many as Lin Studio at this point. It's pretty good for all levels, and it's also free. So, Effect House, this is the new kid on the block. At this point, I believe they do face, 3D body, and 2D hand-based experiences, but no world-based experiences. At least not in the way that other ones do. This is changing all the time, so this might not be wholly accurate right at the moment, but I checked last night, and I think this is like the current situation. They also come with templates just like the last two, which you can either, create experiences with no code using those, or you can use their node-based visual scripting, or you can do custom code if the code in all of these experiences or all of these software packages I've been describing so far is JavaScript for Spark AR, Lin Studio, and Effect House. Different types of JavaScript, but JavaScript. When you create things within Effect House, they're only viewable on TikTok. Because it is so brand new, there is very limited documentation. So that's something to keep in mind. There are limited templates. I think there's like 6 or 7 templates at this point, and kind of limited capabilities again because it's new. I imagine all of this will change within the next 6 months to a year. But because of the lack of documentation and stuff, and because it's just kind of newer software, it could be like a little bit, at least at this point, it can be a little unpredictable at times. So I would kind of recommend this for people that are like a little more established, like intermediate or higher, or if you want to do something really simple and just customize a template, that's totally beginner friendly. But like to do bigger things, I think you need some chops to go forward. Eighth Wall, as I was describing earlier, is a web AR software package. I really haven't used this very much. I checked it out about like a year ago. It does world, image, or face-based. It has both no code or custom code, options. It's cool that it's like viewable just through a browser, so people don't have to download anything. The documentation is pretty good. As far as I can tell, there was no templates, like pre-existing templates, like the other software I was talking about. It does have limited capabilities when you're designing AR for a browser. You don't actually have access to like all of the processing power of the mobile device that you're designing it for. So you really have to create even more stripped down experiences, which is something to keep in mind. So simple is probably better. And this does seem to be designed for more like people with more experience, I would say, like more like enterprise level sort of stuff, as well as like, indie developer types. It does have a subscription model, so it's not free. I think the entry level like starter pack is like $10 a month. $50 a month is like for like a professional. $100 a month is like commercial, and then there's like enterprise level. You'll have to look at that if you're interested in this solution. But yeah, it seems they seem to be developing quickly and creating like cool stuff. So now let's talk about hardware. So AR glasses do exist. and we'll dig in a little bit about each one of them. They're mostly not available for commercial folks yet. Like the major offerings in the space are enterprise level, but it's probably only a matter of time. I mean, I don't have a magic ball, so I'm not going to make any predictions about exactly when AR glasses are going to become ubiquitous, but, you know, maybe like 10 years-ish, we'll see. But each one of these has different capabilities and different price points, so we'll dig in a little bit to those. There's the Google Glass. People seem to really like this one. It's very capable, but again, it's really designed for enterprise. There's the Hololens. This gives you an example of sort of the price point of some of these devices. I think the Hololens is a little more expensive than the other ones, but you know, we're talking like over $1,000, which is again maybe why these are designed more for enterprise. Also, as far as I know, there's limited experiences available for these because they really are designed for commercial purposes. Like there's not as many like entertainment options like to view through these experiences, but they do exist. They're just not quite as prevalent with the social media based ones, which are more sort of based on entertainment and art stuff. So the Think Reality A3 is also available. People are a big fan of this. This one is tethered, I believe. So the other two, I believe, are freestanding. So you can, they're not connected to your computer, for example, when you're using them. But this one is. So you're actually attached to a device like your computer, which is doing the processing. So it's doing all the heavy lifting, so that you can have a smaller pair of glasses, essentially. If you're trying to fit all of the processing power into a pair of glasses, it's really, really challenging, not only for space reasons, because you don't want to create something that's like crazy, crazy bulky, but also for heat reasons. It's like hard to manage like heat sinks and all sorts of stuff when you get into that frame form. So a lot of people are tethering, connecting to external devices to offload the processing and then just feed the experience back to the glasses. InReal is another example of this. These are tethered to your phone. I believe these are the light glasses. These just came out, and these are a little bit more consumer targeted. I think they're like $600 or something like that. But they kind of have like it's a little difficult to describe. I haven't seen full blown like immersive like AR art experiences with these. I've seen more like interfaces, like watch a YouTube video on like a spatial plane within your living room, that sort of stuff. These are also brand new. I haven't had a chance to try them out myself. I've just seen videos of what's possible. So, but it's exciting to see, something that actually just looks like glasses doing real AR. There's a lot of potential there. So, the spectacles are the ones that I have the most experience with. I've been working with Snap for the last, I guess it's been over a year now. These are for developers only at this point. So there's a few hundred people worldwide that have access to these that are actually creating experiences for the glasses. These are not tethered, so all of the processing happens within the glasses themselves. And for that reason, you really need to make experiences that are very lightweight, both in file size and also like, processing intensity. So, but they're real AR. I've created, full experiences with them. And if you're interested in participating as one of the creators, there's a form where you can sign up to be considered. It's up there in the left-hand corner. It's spectacles.com/creator form. So if you're interested in trying to design for these, I would suggest you sign up for that. It's been a lot of fun to design for them and also really challenging, like any sort of like edge of technology. That's that's the playground we're playing in at this point. So there's a lot of variability and bug hunting and all that sort of stuff that comes with the territory. It's just how it works. I imagine these may move to commercial at some point, but they're not right now.
Hi! Welcome to the future garden, where we plan tomorrow today. In this place, anything is possible.
My latest AR artwork is called The Future Garden, and it was built for Snap's Next Spectacles, which are their AR glasses. And it's set in a parallel dimension, and it's a garden that you get to grow. It's blending a series of super cutting edge technologies, including voice ML, which allows you to use keywords to trigger things, 3D hand tracking, which allows you to use hand gestures, and single plane tracking, which scans all of the surfaces in your environment and makes a real-time mesh that you can then interact with. So for example, you can plant flowers essentially all over your room, including the wall and the ceiling if you choose to. And it also has a real-time physics engine. All of that for a tiny little pair of glasses. It's pretty impressive. I used a combination of Procreate, Photoshop, Blender, Illustrator, After Effects, and finally Lin Studio, which is the AR software that I used to build it. So check it out.
Yeah, so this is the latest project that I created for the spectacles. As you can tell, it really does, it's handling a lot in a very small frame, which is pretty exciting. My friend Ibrahim and I built this together, and yeah, it just gives an example of what's possible. When people have glasses, we can move beyond we can move to a hands-free experience, which offers all sorts of things. And when you can track hands within that experience as well, you can trigger all sorts of stuff within an environment very fluidly, gesturally, These recently have made an advancement. These are the Moho Lenses. This is actually the CEO of the company with the lenses in his own eye. They've begun to do some human testing with these. I haven't tried these myself, so I have no idea what kind of processing they're doing or exactly how they're doing it, but people are working on lenses and they are making advancements. So it'll be interesting to sort of watch this space within the next few years. And see how that develops. One thing people are doing right now is using the Oculus headset, which is actually a VR headset for AR, using a process called pass-through, which basically, even though the front of the Oculus is clearly opaque, there's cameras embedded within the front, which it can then sort of show you the feed from. So that's the pass through. You're passing through via the cameras to see the real physical world around you. But these headsets are processing wise are pretty capable, and so you can do more intensive experiences on them. I look forward to trying this myself because I have an Oculus too. I just haven't had a chance yet, but it's a cool space. It comes with these little controllers that you can use, which offer a lot of opportunity for interaction as well. And then no AR talk would be complete without a little rumor mill. The Apple glasses, everybody's been talking about the Apple glasses for forever. Nobody really knows when they will happen. It's pretty clear that they will probably happen at some point, but Apple, everything they do, they're holding their cards tight, and I think they want to get it right. So, we might see these in the next few years. We might not. I'm not really sure. A lot of people think that the Apple glasses will be kind of what will launch AR wearables into, the common person's experience. Just because Apple's so good at consumer products, but we'll see. I don't know. Rumors abound, as I said. TBD. Let's see how it goes. Where do you start with all this information? I know this was a ton, and it can probably seem a little overwhelming, but my recommendation for approaching this space is to start small and be you. So bring whatever you have, whatever your experience is, whatever story you want to tell, whatever makes you you, bring it to this space, because that's where we're actually going to make the discoveries about what this new medium can do. And starting small is advisable because you can get very complex very quickly. Starting small is a way of, like, you know, keeping the scope contained so that, number one, you know, you can deploy it properly. It'll run on mobile phones. You won't get too overwhelmed by trying to accomplish too much at one time. And just create a project that you imagine happening, and then create that, and then come up with another idea, and then make that little thing. And after 6 months to a year, you're going to have developed, skills along the way that, when you stack them together, becomes really, really powerful. So, I mean, that's how I've done it. I just started with small projects and making my own dreams come true. And then one little piece at a time, I developed skills. And within a few years, I was like, oh, yeah, I can really build stuff with this. If you're totally not a game dev person, you've never built anything quite like this, like an interactive experience, Adobe Aero is really a good place to start. For all the reasons I gave earlier, it's free, it's drag and drop, there's no code. There's limited functionality compared to some of the other pieces of software that are like super duper on the edge of innovation. But I think for that reason, too, it's actually like good for beginners, because there's only so much you can do. There's only so many tools that you need to learn in order to navigate the experience. And it's a great way of just sort of testing out ideas. You can also just, like, for example, drag and drop a layered PSD into Adobe Aero, and it automatically generates like a layered illustration, like a spatially layered illustration. So there's all these like sort of like shortcut ways of making things quickly within it. And it comes with assets and stuff. If you're not a 3D modeler, or you don't have, you don't have the time or attention to make that sort of stuff, it comes with things built in. So it's a great place for folks to start if you're just, if you're curious, you know. The way that I've learned, and the way that most people learn things these days is by finding tutorials online or workshops like this amazing SETI Institute program that's happening at PSU. But if you're not in Portland, finding tutorials online is great. YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok are really the primary places that I'm seeing people post those tutorials. I've created a few tutorials like on YouTube. I'll give you my link later. And I'm also on these other social media networks as well. And I do pretty regular tutorials on little things that I've learned, or big things. Find people that are making stuff that you think is cool. And if they're, if they're sharing how they made it, you can really learn a lot from individual creators at this point. Create a network. I think this is like any kind of like community. Like we're all making discoveries all of the time, and I think that we will move further and faster if we're genuinely connected with one another and sharing our insights. At least that's what I'm noticing, and I think there's historical evidence for this too, for pre-existing mediums. But like making your friend group online, folks that are doing this. All of the social networks have AR people on them. A great way to find them is by using hashtags. So, search for AR artist, for example, on any one of these will probably lead you to some really cool people doing really cool stuff. And you can learn a lot from them, be inspired by them, and and hopefully create a network of folks that you can like both learn from and ask questions of, etc. Discord servers are, you may already be on a bunch of Discord servers like I am, but that's where a lot of this information is being exchanged. It's basically like a chat server where you can easily communicate via text with people or pictures or whatever. Here are some of the ones that I have found specifically for AR and VR. Also known as XR, if you've never heard that. It stands for extended reality, and it's really just a blanket term that encompasses both AR, VR, and MR, which is mixed reality, which I'll save all those definitions for another time. But anyway, XR creators, this is the website. This is just sort of like a combined space of people that are making stuff and asking questions, releasing projects, etc. If you're going to be exploring Effect House, a great place to join is this Effect House Creators Discord. The people at TikTok that actually run the AR stuff or the Effect House stuff are very participatory. So you can ask questions directly to engineers and project managers and stuff like that. And they're always letting people know about like the latest and greatest innovations, capabilities, templates, etc. It's also a great place to build community. Same thing with Lightship AR creators. This is devoted to Lightship, and since Lightship is both of these are really, really new, it's one of the best places to find the most up-to-date current information about these pieces of software, and it's a really great place if you have questions and you want to learn. And then last, Julian's Galaxy is another Discord server. This one's a little more like open-ended, kind of like XR Creators is, where it's just devoted to everything immersive. But it's like, I think it's got like 1,000 people on it or something, and it's another great place to ask questions, make friends, be inspired, learn. I'll leave those up for just a second if you want to take a screenshot. I'll also try to put some of these links maybe in the description of the YouTube video and stuff so that you guys can easily access them later. Here are some learning resources for the specific pieces of software. So as I was talking about them, if there was one that like caught your eye, these are great places to start for these individual pieces of software. Lin Studio is totally one of my favorites. I promise they're not paying me to say that. I just think it's really capable. It's been around longer than a lot of the other ones, and I think for that reason alone, it's just a little more solid. But anyway, this is the Getting Started guide for all of their documentation and references and stuff like that. Lin Studio is very well documented on their website, so if you want to know how to do anything, this is kind of the place to start, and that will be a portal for all the other instructions. Adobe Aero, if you want to start with that, as I was describing, here is the main learning portal for Adobe Aero. I created a good chunk of the tutorials that are on there right now. So you'll see some of the same information I presented today, but there's also a lot of stuff I didn't include today. And a bunch of like how-tos, like how to use the behavior builder, how to set up a proximity trigger, all the nitty-gritty of just how to use the software. Spark AR. Spark AR is like largely it's gathered around the Facebook group, as far as I can tell. This is like the main community hub for everything Spark AR. This is where people release projects. It's where they ask questions. It's where people learn. It's really, if you're going to be using Spark AR, you absolutely should join and jump in. It's a great place to, again, make community, make friends, and ask questions if you run into confusing things. We're all kind of like on the frontier together, like in this like unexplored territory. So you really got to find your people so you can help each other like navigate in the sometimes dark corridors of emergent tech. And if you're interested in Unity, this is a brand new top to bottom guide about, it's called AR for Everyone, and it leads you through how to use Unity for AR in a series of like 30 videos or something like that. It's created by CodeCamp, or No CodeCamp, I think it's called. I haven't gone through it myself, but I did. I watched a few of the snippets of the videos and saw people's comments. People are real jazzed about this. So if you really want to go, like into the fully customizable path, like game dev path, totally check it out. It's free. It's on YouTube. And enjoy. All right. Last, this is all my stuff. This is where you can find me online. My YouTube channel is down at the bottom. I've got tutorials posted on there, and I also post about projects and stuff that I'm doing. These are the social media networks that I'm on. I'm always kind of like posting about the experiments that I'm doing, and which is like all the time. And yeah, and new stuff within the space. So yeah, if you want to find me, here's where you can find me. And that's it. Thank you for your attention today. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of talking, a lot of information, but hopefully you gleaned something that will be genuinely useful for you. And if you have specific questions, like hit me up on Twitter or whatever, like I'm happy to help. And I'll go ahead and stop sharing, and maybe we'll move on to the QA. So if you guys have any questions, now's your time.
Hello, Heather. This was an amazing presentation. It was so sort of all-encompassing. It was so detailed and so much information. And I think it'll give people sort of watching a sense of sort of what the landscape is, how to start, what to do, but also to remember that I did sort of notice that just be you, that it's not about the tools or the technology, it's about the story and the person making it as much as, and to keep track of that. We sometimes with technology get drown in sort of the technical aspects of it and like trying to figure it out and wondering what it can do rather than whether it is a good tool or platform for your story and your vision. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. I had a few questions, and I think the people will slowly come up with questions. I did think, yes, we should, I would love to, if you want to, sort of, I thought I was creating folders maybe for all of the presenters, workshops, speakers to share slides if they wanted, or any other materials or a resource. And then we'll put a link in the Discord, and we'll also put a link back on the website so that anyone has access to it. The goal anyway is to create this learning, creative making community. So this would be great. And this your talk reminded me that I should definitely do that. I was curious how you sort of found your way, and I actually wanted to talk more about the spectacles and that the HoloLens and the glass, the sort of more XR aspects of mixing sort of a virtual world with our physical world aspects to it. How you found your way to sort of this particular space and what you think of. I know it's still growing and changing, but there are, for the person both making it and experiencing it, they're also walled off from each other. And how do you choose which of the sort of tools to design with, but also how affordable, accessible? Like I'm curious about accessibility and sort of as this thing is evolving so quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it's a moving target, as I was saying earlier. So everything changes every day. You got to keep on top of it. But I mean, as far as like how I found myself into the space, I'm interested in the evolution of stories, and I feel like this is the next stage of that, and that there's this new type of story that we can create where, you know, the audience is much more than just sort of a passive observer, and we can actually give people an opportunity to rehearse like agency, like experience a world in which like all of their actions are like deeply impactful, and they're kind of, you know, it's almost like I'm interested in the hero's journey, like a lot of storytellers. And so when you could create experiences that put people within the hero's journey, I feel like that's like a intellectually and emotionally kind of useful thing. And so AR is a tool that we can use for that. I mean, specifically, I'm interested in context. I'm interested in leveraging like the context of the physical world and not overriding the physical world. I love the physical world, and I want to create ways that create more transparency for the beauty inherent around us. Like I'm a big nature nerd, and so I've been trying to create experiences that offer visibility into these like hidden ecosystems like around us all the time, and AR is a really good tool for that. But yeah, in my vision of how I'd like to see this move forward, I would like, you know, I'd like people looking out and less at their little screens all the time. And AR, as long as like, you know, there's some caveats to this, as we all know. There's technology is like a very powerful tool, and it can be used for bad and good. And like we need to be upfront, asking the good questions and making plans and putting some frameworks around things so that stuff doesn't get out of hand or become exploitive for the humans that are using it. You know, like, which of course technology driven completely by capitalism can come do, like we've seen examples of it. And yeah, so we need to be talking about all of those things like right now, but I think I lost track of the other questions that you were asking. Could you repeat one of them or?
Yeah, I was curious about like the accessibility of the creations. And I know that sometimes some of these devices are expensive, but I also sort of am curious about, art has always lived behind sort of galleries or museums, and this can be out in the world, and how you feel about, whether that changes also how you create for sort of a broader audience that maybe, younger people, people wandering. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and actually you made me realize I should put this in the second iteration of this talk, like talk about the accessibility portion of it, because it's actually another one of the things that AR does that's amazing. Like it takes art out of the gallery, behind the closed doors of, and puts it into the real world around all of us, and that's one reason why the social networks are maybe a little bit more accessible at this point. Like there's more sort of organic interest in them. I don't know if it's just because of their user base or the fact that a lot of them have kind of focused on face filters, which are very like user centric. But sorry, that's my dog Beefcake. It must post person must be here. Anyway, I think that's one reason why AR has gained traction in those spaces, and it makes it, it just makes more people use it. Honestly, it's a way for people to discover your work and to easily access it. I have not personally developed for like the higher end models like Hololens or any of those things. Like I haven't even tried them. And part of that is just cost, like I'm an artist. I don't make tons of money. And also I am a developer. I am a programmer, but like my real nitty gritty skill set, like what stirs my coffee in the morning, is the art part. So like I don't want to spend months and months and months and months coding and only being able to draw like a little bit. Sorry, Beefcake is okay.
No, I think that's part of the real world. I actually like this because, part of the stream talks is you get to see a little bit of sort of the creators' like lives and studios and work and what tool, like there's some people who have their tools behind them. It's all very fascinating and lovely.
Yeah.
That that we don't separate that anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is my attic. This is where I work. It's a old house on the north side of Portland, and my little dog is a little barky sometimes. Anyway, yeah. So I haven't really experienced like the more high end stuff because I think getting into it seemed too much. Like I dabbled in AR about 7 years ago using Unity. And even really, really simple things were really, really hard and required like a lot of coding. And that's why 3 years ago when I tried again and discovered that the software had changed and I could suddenly do things on my own and I didn't actually have to have a team of developers. I could do stuff in my little attic. That's where the shift kind of happened. And I was like, oh, okay, I can create full worlds. I can really bring my imagination to life, and it's accessible to me. Now I don't have to, pay a Unity developer or a team of developers. So personally, as an artist, that made AR more accessible to me. I love the idea of putting art around us and out of the gallery. So that accessibility is really important. I think we're moving towards a more accessible version of AR, but because it's so early, everything's still kind of in walled gardens, like in the social networks or in app-based stuff. I think we're going to move towards a more native experience where AR is either just integrated into the OS of our devices or into browsers, which people already have and are accessing information from. So it'll be more fluid. When it gets to that level of adoption, we're really going to have to, just to bring it up, which you may already be thinking, we're going to have to be really careful about how we curate or allow the digital layer access to us, how we choose to interact with it. Privacy is another thing to consider, which I know you do a lot of work in. And so big questions, around this sort of stuff, but there's a lot of potential for really powerful connection and storytelling, I think. So,
yeah. I've been asking all of the sort of presenters and speakers and workshop people this, but do you have a couple of sort of, and you mentioned a few things in your talk, but are there a couple of like really interesting inspirations for you, sort of people or projects that sort of you're watching and you're learning from or inspired by, and sort of what delights you? What's next? Yeah,
sure.
And we'll maybe close with that. So yeah.
Okay, great. Inspiration wise, I mean, I feel like there's this like developing group of artists, many of whom I'm friends with now. Like we've found each other online because there were so few of us, and now we're creating that kind of organic network of watching each other learn and grow and being in exhibitions together and all that sort of stuff. So so that's really exciting. I think one of the first people I discovered that was doing kind of amazing stuff was Universal Everything. They're an art collective and they do all sorts of experiences, but they've done a lot of like they did a real-time experience that will basically scan your environment in real time and create a mesh that can then spawn flowers and pieces of sculptural art that are based on the color palette of the actual objects within the space. So it creates a sort of living sculpture that's integrated into whatever environment you're in, and that just felt very personal and exciting and very simple. It was just a good idea that was then executed well. Lauren Cason is another artist that's working in the space that very commonly does beautiful stuff. She's a minimal designer sort of. She worked in games too, worked for Apple, that sort of stuff. So she's bringing some of those aesthetic choices to stuff, but she's also just a really smart person and making really cool stuff. But really, I'm just I'm looking at the hashtags too. That's how I find new work all of the time. That's how I found it in the first place. So you have to do a little bit of digging, but that's exciting too. It's a different kind of treasure hunt, I suppose. And once you're part of these spaces and start sharing, people will find you, and then you'll join groups of artists that are discussing things or going to do a show or whatever it is. All of this stuff is very early days and it's growing very quickly. The last year has been really extraordinary. So if people are excited to join in, this is an excellent time to really try. So yeah. Well,
thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I'm really excited, and I think we're all looking forward to the workshop. Heather's going to be teaching at 10 a.m. next Wednesday, a class called Art Prints, but the art is AR. And so you will actually get to make make an AR piece, and we'll have a show at the end of the day. And we will have a show in September for all of the participants and work they're making, both the speakers, the teachers, the students, and some collaborations. And hopefully Helga will have something there, but hopefully all of you who will have something there too. And Heather, thank you so much for this. This was just incredible. And I look forward to seeing you next Wednesday.
Yeah, we'll hang out next week. Yeah, just for anybody that's watching, that's in Portland, that's interested in participating in this, the idea is that people are going to come with some sort of image that they want to turn into an image anchor. So the way that I showed some examples of art prints or the jewelry piece that use an image anchor that you can attach an AR experience. We're going to be using Aero, and it's going to be a lab. So I'm going to lead you through how to do stuff. There's going to be some conceptual stuff, but then there's going to be a lot of work time where you actually get to build something, and I'll be around and I can help you create whatever you're imagining. And then at the end of the day, everybody's going to print out their image, and we're going to have a little gallery and experience one another's work and talk about it. And it should be a lot of fun. So yeah, please come.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And Nathan, maybe we will stop being live now.